This video is about absolute value and why do opposites equal zero. First thing we need to do in order to establish that is to write some words that talk about what these pictures here look at. If you see these pictures up here at the top, they're showing numbers that are going up in value. So some words that we might associate with that, we're going to write into this box. So some words might be above, ascend, increase, forwards, up, deposit, grows, positive, winning. We're going to add the word add. Okay, so now in the other column here, we're looking at words that talk about numbers as they're going in the opposite direction. 10, 9, 8, 7. We're going in the opposite direction of the ones over here on the left. So we're going to write the opposite word that we would associate with the words on the left. So over here, instead of above, we would write below. Ascend would be descend. Increase would be decrease. Forwards, backwards. Up would be down. Opposite of a deposit would be a withdrawal. Something that grows, we would cut it back so it has a chance to grow back again. The opposite of positive is negative. The opposite of winning is losing. And the opposite of add is subtract. So we need to know which words we're using so that we can talk about opposites more effectively. So we need a few definitions moving forward so that we're all talking the same thing. The first one is the definition of a positive number. A positive number are all numbers greater than zero. So we're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. Now it might be surprising to you that a negative number is not all numbers less than zero, but they're the numbers that are opposite of a positive number. So we want to use those words opposite of. They're going to be very key for us when we talk about integers and what happens to integers. So we want to know and use those words opposite of. So for example, if I wanted to know what the opposite of 30 is, I would say negative 30. If I wanted to know the opposite of negative 5, I would say positive 5. These numbers are opposite of each other. Okay, so we can understand that. What's interesting though is 0 doesn't really have an opposite. So let's go define what that is. So when I look at the number 0, we know that 0 is not positive or negative. We also know that 0 is considered something neutral. I heard a student say earlier that we find it in the middle of the number line, separating the positive and negative numbers. They're kind of like the guards. So all of these things are true about 0. All of these things are. One of the things we have to remember too is that 0 has value. A lot of people think 0 is nothing. Well, if it was nothing, we couldn't create numbers like 100 or 1,000 because that 0 does have value. It holds its place. Okay? Now one more definition I want to give you is that of a whole number. So a whole number is considered all the positive numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, including 0. That is our definition of whole numbers. One more definition I want to give you before we move on is that of an integer, because we're going to talk a lot about integers in the coming weeks in class. So an integer is a whole number and their opposites. So we know the whole numbers are 0 and all the counting numbers, but we know that opposites of those counting numbers are an integer. You will notice that I didn't mention any fractions or decimals because those are not integers. It would be just the number complete whole by itself, not a partial. So that's an important word, the whole number. Okay? Now let's take a look at this number line here. Here I have a number line and I have three numbers on it. I have -3, 0, and +3. Well, we should note how far a number is away from 0. We can take a look here and we can see that -3 is 3 spaces away from 0. The same is true for +3. It is also 3 spaces away from 0. It's interesting that with opposite signs, one is negative and one is positive, that they have the same distance from 0. And that's an important concept and help driving to our question.
Yeah, baby, yeah.
All opposites have the same distance from 0. Very important. If we understand that all opposites have the same distance from 0, we are more able to understand our question today. Okay, so let's continue a little bit more. And let's look at this a little bit deeply. Remember, the title of our notes is called absolute value. So let's write that definition. Absolute value is the distance a number is from 0. So it's great to have something for us to figure that out. We want to also know how it looks. So some of us might have seen these bars before. They kind of look like railroad tracks, which kind of remind us of distance and traveling. And what it is we put a number in here. And when a number is inside the bars, whatever is happening in the bars, whatever that number is, we want to know how far is this number away from 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at some numbers and we're going to see if we can define how far these numbers are away from 0. When you look at these 4 sets of numbers, they're in different places and they also kind of look a little different. Every single one of these is different. They are asking for different things. So let's start from the top left and we're going to work our way around here. We'll do the top row, then the bottom row. So if I was to read this one right here, this one says the absolute value of 3. Well, in other words, how far is 3 from 0? Well, we saw earlier with our number line that it was 3 away from 0. If we go over to this other one over here, the second one on the top on the right, it's asking us the absolute value of -3. How far is -3 from 0? Again, distance is 3. Distance is a positive number. When you tell someone how far something is away, when we give distance, we always give distance as a positive number. Then, down below here, we'll start with the left. This one on the left here looks a little bit different than the one above it. And what makes it different is this little sign here. Well, that little sign packs a big punch. What we want to say when we see that negative sign, we want to use the words the opposite of, because that's what it means. A negative means the opposite of something positive. Remember, that was our first definition of what a negative number is. It's the opposite of something positive. So what this is saying to us is, what is the opposite of the absolute value of 3? Well, if the absolute value of 3, or the distance from 3 from 0 is 3, what is the opposite of that number? What is the opposite of 3? Well, the opposite of 3 is -3. So here is the only time where it looks like, hey, it says absolute value. Isn't distance always positive? It's true. Remember what's inside. But remember, this little sign outside, this negative sign, is saying, hey, take the opposite of that. We want to know what the opposite is. So if we do the exact same thing on the other side, and we apply that idea, here it is, the opposite of the distance -3 is from 0. Well, -3 is from 0. We can see it up here, right? -3 is 3 away from 0, but I want the opposite of that. So this is going to be -3. So let's get back to our question. Why do opposites equal 0? So I'm going to show it to you on the number line, and hopefully this makes sense. And using our words from our first slide and everything we've learned about absolute value, hopefully this makes sense. So here we can see the number 3 is something that, let's say, we would move up. -3 from 0 goes down, right? You're going to go down to -3 or up to 3. Well, if I take both of these concepts, up and down, oops, let me try to separate this out. If it'll break it apart for me. Oops, sorry about that, guys. Get rid of that. Delete. Let's try it again. Gotta love technology. This is 3 away. This is 3 away. So if I'm looking at something where this is going down 3, this is going up 3. If I take those words of down and up, we did say earlier that they were opposite. So if I was starting in one place and I went down 3 and then I came back up 3, am I not in the same place where I started? So that's why opposites, when we add them, equal 0. So we can say that when we add 3 and negative 3, because they're opposites, if we were to add them together, we would equal 0. And that's why do opposites equal 0. So let's do one more thing about number lines, because this is important. Some of us are not familiar with these words, horizontal or vertical, or we've heard them and we're not quite sure what direction it goes. Horizontal is when we go side to side. Vertical is when we go up and down. Now, we have seen more vertical number lines than we've seen horizontal number lines. Some horizontal number lines might be used when we talk about bank accounts. Two partial number lines put together, actually, we would see in football. In our vertical number lines, we have seen them in thermometers. Thermometers, there we go. And probably one of the more famous one that everyone has had some experience with is an elevator. We've been able to go above ground and below ground, so a little bit showing how numbers work. So hopefully this helps you to understand a little bit more about absolute value.